Kuzangpo everyone, welcome to the 6th episode of the RIGSS Podcast. I'm your host, Sonamington. We're privileged to have Azusa Kubota, the Resident Representative of UNDP Bhutan, to get us up to speed with the agency and its work. The United Nations Development Programme remains one of Bhutan's key development partners for almost 48 years. Notwithstanding the challenges posed by the pandemic, UNDP was quick to assess and evolve with the situation and continues to forge a stout path ahead for a vibrant and resilient future. As the UNDP Bhutan stands firm in its commitment and action towards balanced social, economic and environmental sustainability by rethinking economy and governance, Bhutan remains more confident and optimistic of what can be achieved together going forward. We warmly welcome Azusa Kubota, the Resident Representative of UNDP Bhutan since 2019. Prior to that, Kubota served in various capacities in different parts of the world for UNDP, UNICEF, UNFPA and UN Women. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the RIGSS Podcast.
Thank you so much, Sonam. I'd like to thank RIGSS for giving me this opportunity. I'm truly humbled.
The pleasure is all ours. To begin with, the Accelerator Labs, which as we know is the agency's response to the emerging sustainability challenges for issues such as waste management, youth unemployment and public sector innovation and ecosystems in Bhutan. So, what are some of the innovative ideas or proposals the UNDP is currently supporting under its A-Lab initiative?
Thank you so much, Sonam. This is once again a very timely question because we just launched the Accelerator Lab here in Bhutan. So I'll try to answer your question by explaining why we have this Accelerator Lab right now. I believe it was Jack Welch who famously said, if the speed of change on the outside is greater than the inside, the end is near. In a way, the Accelerator Lab is UNDP's response to our acute realization that if we do not transform ourselves, if we do not re-engineer ourselves, we will not be able to fulfill our mandate as the UN's development program. So we already had the plans for this lab before the COVID-19 pandemic, but in a way, the pandemic has amplified the needs for this type of facility. So the question now is, how do we prepare ourselves to tackle these complex challenges at the time of unknown? And these very stressful conditions require fundamentally different new set of skills and new ways of doing things. And this is what Accelerator Lab offers to Bhutan. In the Accelerator Lab, in consultation with national stakeholders, as you mentioned, we have chosen 3 frontier challenges: waste management, unemployment issue, particularly among youth, and public sector innovation. And we hope to be able to introduce new and different approaches to those very complex, interconnected problems. And one example of such experimentation is the behavioral insights experiments we're doing with National Environment Commission on Waste Management. We would like to see what kind of psychological nudge will influence people's behavior towards segregation of waste, for example. And the next tool we are introducing or we're promoting is design thinking, which has been adopted widely in Bhutan as well. This is really about engaging people, citizens, in the design. We have done a lot of ethnography work for youth unemployment issue. We interviewed not only the young people themselves, but the parents, teachers, and job providers. We promote deep listening, basically try to have a human-centered, empathy-based approach to solutions. We are working with RCSC in several areas in improving service delivery with active citizens' feedback. So hopefully the deep listening, human-centered approach will be mainstreamed in their efforts to improve services. And lastly, we are very much promoting partnership. The strength and advantage of humanity would be that we have the capability to collaborate with each other. So we are promoting collective intelligence, breaking the silos of institutions, mandates, and barriers to try to get everybody work together. And we hope to deepen our partnership with not only the government institution, but the innovators who are very active in Bhutan.
Thank you, Ola. Like I mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic has amplified the need to rethink our way forward. And with Bhutan at a crossroads whereby we're striving towards building resilience against future shocks and at the same time ensuring a robust, inclusive, and greener recovery from the pandemic. What do you think are some of the capabilities required in this regard?
Well, I think with the COVID pandemic, everybody is at a crossroad, So there's a need for us to think and act differently, and this need has been really amplified. His Majesty has always reminded us time and again that we must look towards future and seize opportunities. And such vision and spirit are at the heart of anticipatory governance. I want to talk a little bit about the anticipatory governance as a set of capabilities which I believe are required in today's unknown, uncertain, and complex world. So this anticipatory governance can mean different things to different people, but I can say that it is not about having a crystal ball and predicting future. I already said we don't know the future. So it's a capability, a broad-based one, to actively explore possibilities, experiment, and continuously learn as part of a broader governance system. I believe those who will come out of the crisis stronger are the ones that have been able to see the early signs of changes and adapt fast without hesitation. And I would like to really commend the Bhutan's efforts at the early stage of COVID crisis. I have seen some remarkable developments taking place in terms of partnership, government institutions coming together with private sector partners on digital transformation. Some of the processes, such as procurement systems, have been re-engineered. So a lot of reforms and transformation in a real-time manner have taken place. And I think it's an opportunity for us to build on these muscles and the practices. In UNDP, we have been looking at this new set of capabilities required for the future. And part of building the muscle is to have humility. And Bhutan, as a compassionate, very people-centered nation, I think the concept of humility resonates well. The first humility is to really admit that we all need to embrace the fact that we don't know many things happening around us, and we certainly don't know our future. Acknowledging this requires courage. And also, this would allow us to seek support in defining what it is that we don't know. And we have to have the antennas out all the time to gauge the early signs of or signals of change and understanding what this means to us. And the second humility is to be able to listen to data. Our ability to let the data speak itself. Evidence-based policy making is not a new concept, but with the pandemic and the new realities of the future, it's very important to have data in real-time sense. Many government states around the world are using big data, for example, and they're relying on periodic big surveys is important, but it's not simply good enough for a fast-changing world that we live in today. Agile and flexible ways of collecting data by engaging citizens in real time to understand their needs and changes in their needs, very important capability to have in today's world, and technology can certainly help us. And the third humility is to be able to listen to people. Design thinking is really about that, the capacity to suspend our own judgments and have open minds, and the ability to be able to see challenges from the eyes of stakeholders. We have been talking about empathy-based service provision and people-centered approach. So they're all part of this humility to be able to listen to people. So I always tell my team that we as UNDP, if we cannot put faces to their experiences, we will not be able to come up with the strategies that speak to their needs.
So, in what ways can UNDP help, or work together to build these capabilities?
Well, thank you so much for it's a very difficult question because I firmly believe that there's no best practice. Our role is to help facilitate that exploration and discovery of best practice for Bhutan by Bhutanese people. Certainly, as UN's development program with a presence in over 170 countries, we have that database of knowledge and experiences to point to what has worked, what hasn't worked. So we believe that even in the world of unknown future, we have the ability to connect the dots and at least to share some of the lessons and accelerate the rate of learning. And the Accelerator Lab, I spoke about it earlier, is designed precisely for the governments to test ideas very quickly so that scarce resources can be invested in the solutions that we know have potential for scaling up and potential for yielding results.
Thank you. Besides the need for building capabilities, what are some of the challenges that the UNDP anticipates in effectively transforming visions into actions?
Thank you, Sonam. I think you asked a question about this famous knowing and doing gap. UNDP has invested quite a bit in understand this gap in order to understand this problem and promote systems approach with a global expert called Otto Schumann. You might know that we recently launched the 2020 Human Development Report, and this report precisely focused on the knowing and doing gap. For example, 80% of the people interviewed felt climate action needs to take place, but only half of them were willing to take actual action. So there is certainly a need to tackle this gap and promote social norms that would create a platform for collective action. Oftentimes, the resources are not the biggest challenge. Of course, the ODA landscape is changing very fast, but we believe that by learning fast, we can maximize and optimize resources through innovation. And this type of approach is going to be more and more important. I believe that it's important to create a system where everybody can be the system. When I engage partners, not only in Bhutan, but globally, why things are not happening despite many plans and policies in place, I often hear many people say, well, our systems won't allow, as if they are looking at the system from outside and pointing fingers to other people. But I think for a collective social movement to happen, to translate visions into action, every one of us has to feel that we are this system. So the question is, how do we create this kind of social norms and movement where every one of us feels responsibility to be part of the system and change it?
So how would you recommend we create such social norms and change the prevailing systems to be part of it?
First of all, I think there has to be incentives. We are all comfortable with what it is, not with what if. So we have to have fail-safe environment, which I talked about. Those with curious minds and innovative spirits should be and must be supported and encouraged. So this goes to some of the reforms that have been talked about. How do we create that fail-safe environment, even in bureaucracy, where innovation can be flourished and encouraged? And some governments have come up with a financing scheme to encourage public sector workers to innovate. And in terms of institutional culture and ecosystem, I think it's very important to have the spirit of innovate first and think about the consequences later. I talked about fast changing world. For example, technologies are changing so fast, and the regulatory frameworks that we have today are sometimes not catching up. So if we say, oh, well, we don't have a regulatory framework, so we're not going to allow this innovation to take place, Are we going to block technological advancement, innovation, because we don't have a law to regulate it? We really have to give some thoughts as to how do we catch up, with the fast-changing world with the existing tools and systems we have.
Thank you, La. That's really something to ponder on. I'm also briefly touched on the Human Development Report, which ranks Bhutan at 129th out of 189 countries in the Human Development Index. So, as simple as it sounds, what does the Human Development Index mean and what does it entail in simple terms?
Thank you. I think the Human Development Index, or HDI, resonates very well with people in Bhutan because it's a concept that promotes a holistic approach to development, recognizing the interconnectedness of everything, literally everything that exists in the world. So this concept is very similar to gross national happiness paradigm. The HDI has measured countries' health, education, and standard of living. Basically, we look at the years of life expectancy, GNI per capita, and years of schooling. But I like to say that, like the world we live in, development is also very dynamic and fast changing. So the priorities and values also shift. So we recognize that the way we measure HDI has to also evolve. And this year, we also pushed the frontiers by having the new planetary pressures adjusted human development index, which basically shows how the global development landscape changes when we consider the well-being of people against the planetary pressures that we are all putting on our mother planet.
Thank you, La. So, given that every development comes with a cost, what are some of the issues that Bhutan needs to be mindful about as we strive for a better HDI?
It's not about competition, but ranking is meant to generate debates and conversation. Like you were asking me a question, you're curious. And when we have ranking system like this, we are able to create a platform for dialogue and really deep dive into what Bhutan can be doing or should be doing better or differently in order to have better ranking. So based on this premise, some of the things that we need to be mindful about with the HDI is that same with sustainable development goals and the HDI indicators, they are inherently about coverage. How many people go to school? How many people have access to X, Y, Z? It's about the accessibility, not so much about the quality. And as the countries and governments become more sophisticated in their ambitions, I think it's very important as a nation to keep an eye on quality. For example, we might have many, many years of schooling and very high rate of enrollment, but if the majority of educated people remain jobless, what is the point? So it's important to keep an eye on qualitative perspective as we aim high for the ranking. And obviously, when we talk about GNI per capita and the growth, balancing it with sustainability would have to be at the heart of our attention. And Bhutan has done remarkably well in this regard, thanks to visionary guidance and leadership from our kings. But I'd like to still say that if Bhutan pursues rigorously the trajectory of economic growth, some of the balancing act will be difficult. So it's very important to keep this in mind. And the last bit is distribution of wealth that's generated from growth. I talked about the inequality adjusted human development index. If we are not being careful about looking after the needs of the most vulnerable, we might risk leaving some people behind. And I know in Bhutan, there's tremendous awareness on narrowing the gap, looking after the needs of the most vulnerable. So I know this is a conversation that's well debated and policy prerogatives have been in place. But I have seen in other countries where so much attention has been given to growth, the needs of the vulnerable groups can be neglected. So those are the things that I like to mention as things that Bhutan should continue to be mindful about.
In this regard, how can Bhutan and UNDP work together to improve our ranking positively going forward?
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, if we are talking simply about improving the ranking, we have three parameters I mentioned. And as the world economic growth accelerates, it's very important for Bhutan also to have clear and concrete measures to improve GNI per capita. And I know the government is working on a 21st century roadmap and economic roadmap and so forth. But as we aim for the graduation from LDC status and so forth, the trade regime needs to be strengthened. For example, also the foreign direct investment flow to Bhutan has been relatively insignificant in comparison to other Asian countries, and certainly even amongst with LDCs in Asia. So how do we promote vibrant trade activities with other countries in the increasingly regionalized and globalized economy? And how do we promote foreign investors coming in to realize some of the ambitious economic growth plans? And even for the trade, I know the government has been proactively thinking about WTO accession, and these are the critical questions to be answered before the graduation, because before the graduation, Bhutan has the opportunity to negotiate for certain preferential treatments. So once again, while COVID crisis has been detrimental to global economy, many governments and states and people are progressively thinking about what can be done now to leapfrog, to ensure sustainable and inclusive economic recovery after the crisis. So it's really a time for Bhutan to be asking these critical questions. For example, tourism has been a very important growth sector for Bhutan, but the way people travel, the tourism sector would fundamentally change after COVID. So now Bhutan should be taking this opportunity to be ready to seize the opportunity when travel resumes. And globally, many of the governments are launching green investments, green revolution packages, economic recovery packages. And there's huge potential to promote green investments, green job creation. So as Bhutan thinks through economic recovery from COVID crisis, are we taking maximum benefit from these global movements? And I haven't even begun to talk about technological advancement. So these are some of the examples of how quickly the world is moving ahead with transformation using the COVID dividends. In terms of health, lives, COVID has been a devastating crisis for everyone. At the same time, COVID has provided once in lifetime opportunity to think through these fundamental transformation opportunities. And I believe Bhutan is well positioned to start thinking about these transformations and make sure that Bhutan taps into these opportunities.
Thus, thank you. Thank you for highlighting some of the critical questions that we need to ask ourselves. I'm also briefly touched on Bhutan's graduation from an LDC category by 2023. So how would that change the dynamics of the UNDP Bhutan partnership?
Thank you. Very well-crafted question. Well, UNDP, we are here in Bhutan based on a very specific and one and only precious relationship. Well, Bhutan is the UN. So irrespective of the income status or development status of the nation, we are very much here to stay. Bhutan is the UN. One of the, I think, former Secretary Generals have put it rightly so. UN can be what the member states want us to be. And we can be as effective as member states want us to be. So in a way, the UN's worth, or UNDP's worth, is determined by the nature and quality of partnership, where Bhutan makes full advantage of our technical and substantive strength, building on the global network knowledge and experiences that I have spoken about. But one thing I like to share here is that UNDP is often seen or referred to as a donor, and we certainly do not see ourselves as such. So I think it's very important as the governments and countries around the world graduate from LDC status and become more sophisticated and matured in terms of their thinking, needs. We really have to fully graduate as UN from being a donor or financier to a true development partner that brings in substance, solutions, and new ideas. I often remind myself that when I engage in conversation with Honorable Prime Minister and many senior decision makers, they always say that they look to UNDP for new ideas. We have presence in 170 plus countries. The ideas and experiences are there somewhere in the world. And if we can't connect Bhutan with these experiences and lessons, we cannot do our job. We are in the last decade of action until Agenda 2030. COVID has definitely led to regression in some of those goals, and HDI certainly. So we are here to help Bhutan find solutions, find new ideas, and make the most of limited resources. So that every dollar invested would lead to optimal results. And at the same time, when we talk about making optimal use of resources, there are many vertical funds coming up, climate financing and so forth. And it's very difficult and complicated to access these funds. And I believe it's UN and UNDP certainly's responsibility to make sure Bhutan maximizes its opportunity to access these funds. And implement them in a timely manner with rigor so that Bhutan can enjoy the maximum benefit of being an LDC status.
Thank you, La. That's very reassuring to know, La. So this is my final question. Has been in Bhutan for almost 2 years now. From your perspective, how has the UNDP Bhutan partnership evolved over the years? And if you could kindly share with us some of your experiences working in Bhutan.
Thank you. It's a personal anecdote, but exactly 10 years ago, I almost came to Bhutan as the deputy resident representative. And some priorities changed in New York, and I was assigned to another country. But since then, I always knew I would serve Bhutan one day. So for me to be here as the resident representative is really a dream come true. Every day is incredible learning. I learn something new every day, being inspired by, first of all, my wonderful team, but also all the partners I work with, including yourself, Sonam. And I think Bhutan is a great country for the UN to serve because there is a clear convergence between the development paradigm and ambition, gross national happiness, and SDGs and overall agenda of 2030. Working closely hand in hand with the government of Bhutan, but its people, it's been a true privilege. And every day is a magic for me. And it's also very evident, I have served in many handful of countries, but UNDP has been valued as a trusted partner, and we have an excellent relationship with the Royal Government. So this is very much thanks to the work done by my predecessors and the team members. So overall, it's been really a wonderful experience. We continue to improve ourselves so that we can live up to the expectations of the people of Bhutan and be part of this very exciting journey ahead.
Thank you, La. Thank you very much, La. With this, we come to the end of our discussion. We would like to thank for really bringing us up to speed with UNDP Bhutan and for all your insightful takeaways. At the same time, we would also like to thank and commend the UN for all the wonderful works they are doing in Bhutan and for all the support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonam, and greetings to all the team members in RIGSS and friends in Bhutan.
Thank you very much, Lam. We would also like to thank all our listeners for joining us, and please take care and stay safe.